Hey, it's Manu with 22 Sounds, and today we want to talk about who could possibly be the next Foo Fighters drummer, if anybody. Yeah, the news of Taylor Hawkins passing was definitely one of the biggest shocks in the music world this year so far. He was well beloved by many fans and by many of his peers as well. He was a guy that just seemed like full of life, such positive energy, so it was a really big shock, very unexpected. And yeah, what we've seen in the last few weeks after the initial shock, we've had a lot of conversations with our people here at the record store about, well, what will happen to the Foo Fighters? Will they continue? And if so, who could possibly be the new drummer for them? Yeah, please subscribe to our channel, like, comment. All these things help us out, help the algorithm going. And yeah, our vision for this channel is we want to bring those conversations that we have here at the record store online. It's one of the things that makes it so much fun to go to the record store and to talk about music, talk about new releases. So this is what we want to do with this channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Yeah, well, there are certain band members in certain bands that are virtually irreplaceable. Well, if they retire, if they pass, it means basically that's it for the band. And the Foo Fighters, of course, are one of those examples. Actually, I know that if Dave Grohl passed away or he quit the band for some reason, we wouldn't even be having this discussion. He is Mr. Foo Fighters. He actually was the band at first, recorded the first album all by himself, but then it slowly became a real band, if you will. Well, talking about Dave Grohl, of course, another example is Nirvana. He went through that when Kurt died. Nobody seriously considered that Nirvana would go on without him. It was clear that Kurt dying meant Nirvana was done as well. Well, oftentimes it's the band leader, the front man, singer, songwriter, the kind of the face of the band that has that kind of status. But there are some examples of drummers passing away, meaning the end of the band as well. Of course, the most famous one is Led Zeppelin. When John Bonham died, that was it for Led Zeppelin. It's been more than 40 years now, and even now they never fully reunited. They played a few select shows, but they never made new music, never toured. So the question is, does Taylor Hawkins have that kind of standing in the Foo Fighters that it means it's over for them? Well, we can say even though Dave Grohl is Mr. Foo Fighters, and I guess anybody that thinks of the Foo Fighters, Dave is the first image that pops in your head. But Taylor has been in the band, or was in the band, for about 25 years. He joined in 1997, and a lot of people were reminded of Dave Grohl when they first heard him. He has a very similar drumming style. It seemed like he was the perfect drummer for the Foo Fighters that wasn't Dave Grohl. And well, that's one thing that, of course, is speculation to a certain degree, but it seems like Dave and Taylor had a really special bond. And of course, that's one thing we always want to say too. We're not talking about replacing a human here. We're only talking about that specific role, the drumming in the Foo Fighters. Of course, Taylor, he was a friend, a bandmate, a father, a husband. You can't replace a human. Just talking about who could play his role as a drummer in the Foo Fighters if they wanted to move on. So if they did, who could it be? We have a few candidates, and let's see how likely they are. We'll start with Matt Cameron. Well, Matt, he of course got really famous with Soundgarden, and then after Soundgarden broke up, he joined Pearl Jam. That's in the meantime over 20 years ago. So he definitely has a good career going, but also he definitely has the standing. There's definitely a big overlap in Soundgarden, Pearl Jam, Foo Fighters fans, so he would certainly have the respect of the fan base right away. He is a peer of Dave Grohl. They kind of came up around the same time in the same scene, in the same grunge wave, so that are definitely pros for him. Now, of course, he also has the technical ability. He's an absolutely amazing drummer. He can hit hard. And when we think about who could be a replacement for Taylor, of course, we want to think about, well, what makes him so special as a drummer. Well, one big thing, of course, that comes to mind is his high energy level. The Foo Fighters aren't super complex musically, but you need somebody that can bring that kind of high energy in. Matt, from a technical point of view, I would say could certainly do it. Well, some people even say he might have been overqualified for Pearl Jam from the get-go. Well, I don't know. The thing is, of course, in Soundgarden, he could bring out a little bit more of the weird tendencies. He has side projects too for that, but obviously he doesn't mind to be in a little more straight-up rock band like the Foo Fighters are. And hey, maybe after all this time, a little change might be a thing, even though he seems really happy with Pearl Jam. So I would say not completely out of the question. Plus, well, maybe there's even a possibility that he doesn't quit Pearl Jam and still be the new Foo Fighters drummer. I mean, both bands are at a point in their career where they don't need to tour constantly and relentlessly. Maybe there's a way to make the schedules work. So Matt, not completely out of the question. Well, next up is Chad Smith. What about Chad Smith? That would even be a bigger name solution, slightly. Chad, of course, has just released a new album with the Chili Peppers. They got their big legendary lineup back together now that John is back in the band, so unlikely that he will quit the Chili Peppers. A lot of the same pros and cons here with this one. Chad, of course, is an absolutely amazing drummer, super versatile, so he can play any style. So from a technical point of view, of course, not a problem, and he can hit hard. Even though, of course, in the studio, on the last Chili Peppers album, he is a little bit more in the pocket. It's a little bit more of a laid-back style, but he can certainly bring it, especially live. And hey, maybe he would be one that could kind of bring in a new flavor to the band, which is something that might be actually good for a band that has been doing it for a long time. Some new input musically can definitely be a nice thing. So Chad, of course, also, he is very experienced. He has played arenas, stadiums for a long time. Certainly wouldn't be faced with the pressure that comes along with this big task. I would say another maybe. Well, what about Dave Lombardo? Well, Dave Lombardo, why do I bring him up? Well, we all know Dave Grohl is a big metal fan. I mean, they just released a few months ago the soundtrack to the first horror movie under the moniker Dream Widow, and it is blistering heavy metal. So Dave, of course, one of the most respected metal drummers in the world, but also Dave is, again, a really versatile drummer. He is not just a metal guy. I mean, the guy has like a million side projects going on. He likes to stay busy, so what's one more? And maybe he could actually also bring a little bit of a new flavor, a different kind to the band, get him some punch. I would say not a terrible idea. Travis Barker. Hey, Travis is actually not the youngest anymore either, but the youngest of the ones that we talked about so far. But he is certainly one that appeals to a younger audience. Yeah, Blink-182 is still actually really, really popular among teenagers of now, not just back then. They keep renewing their fan base, basically, and Travis is a big part of that. He has been involved in countless projects over the recent years, a lot of pop punk. Of course, he's kind of become the go-to mentor for this new pop punk generation. So, and he is definitely also technically a really good drummer. He comes from a punk background, obviously, like Dave did originally, even though it was a little bit of a different generation of punk, a different type, but certainly a high energy drummer that has the technical chops. And hey, maybe he could help help the Foo Fighters appeal to a younger fan base, maybe a younger generation that thinks of the Foo Fighters more as an older band. So that might actually be another pro for Travis as well. Tommy Lee. Too crazy? I don't know. Hear me out. Well, yeah, Tommy seems a little bit like a loose cannon, kind of crazy sometimes for sure. So maybe personality-wise, might not be the best fit for the Foo Fighters at first glance. They all seem like pretty reasonable, collected guys, so I don't know if he would fit in from that perspective. But hey, when you really think about it, Tommy was a little bit to hair metal from a drumming perspective, what Dave was to grunge, like that high energy, wild animal kind of drummer. Maybe that would actually not be so bad. And hey, even though Tommy definitely has his issues, he usually shows up, man. And he's certainly a guy that can play arenas and stadiums. He's not a shy guy for sure. And well, yeah, of course you can say, well, he's also in a massive band. But hey, Motley Crue, yeah, they're about to embark on a big stadium tour. But I would say pretty likely actually that after that tour, there might not be a lot of activity in the Motley Crue camp for a while. I mean, they haven't really been putting out new music. Last one was, well, about 15 years or so ago. So that might actually, from a scheduling point of view, a possibility. Hey, I would certainly be pretty excited to see that Foo Fighters with Tommy Lee. Think about it. Well, next up, we're leaving up a little placeholder for the possibility that I think is not even so unlikely that it is a completely unknown person, or maybe somebody who is just not really known in the mainstream, somebody from like an underground punk or hardcore band or something like that. Why not? Maybe a new face, maybe somebody doesn't come with a lot of baggage. Man, when you think about it, Pat Smear was basically already an underground legend when he joined Nirvana as a touring guitar player and then the Foo Fighters. I mean, he would have probably not thought about ever being able to play arenas and stadiums like he did with the Foo Fighters when he was still with the Germs back in the day. So maybe Dave, again, we talked about his affinity to metal. He of course has hardcore punk roots. Maybe somebody from a smaller punk hardcore band that brings in some kind of new energy level, some young blood. I think that's actually not completely out of the question. Well, and last but not least, Dave Grohl. Well, actually most people that we talked to about this topic said right away, yeah, the absolute best solution, of course, would be Dave Grohl. I mean, it always seemed a little bit like Taylor Hawkins was basically the best drummer for the Foo Fighters, who isn't Dave Grohl himself, and has, as we said initially, very similar playing style, so he would definitely be a good solution. But of course, it is out of the question. I think it's safe to say that Dave would not be the singer and guitar player anymore, and instead goes behind the drum kit, because that replacement would be even more complicated and, yeah, let's just say impossible. But what if maybe there is not only a live replacement? What if Dave Grohl maybe takes over drum duties in the studio and then just get a drummer for live activities? That might be another solution, or one that I was thinking about that I think might actually be kind of a nice solution. What if there isn't an actual new drummer or a permanent new drummer for the Foo Fighters? What if it's something like a revolving door, and they have Dave in the studio, and when they go on tour, bring in new drummers? Maybe one leg you have this drummer, one leg you have that drummer. I'm kind of thinking of it like certain sports teams retire numbers for legends of their teams. I think it would actually be, in a way, kind of a nice solution. It would basically say, hey, there is no replacement for Taylor. Taylor will always be the spiritual drummer of the Foo Fighters, but you have people come in that play the live shows. It would give him a opportunity to move on, to keep going, without basically saying we're replacing Taylor. I think that would actually be a great thing. It would be a nice tribute to him too, without having to quit the band altogether. What do you think? Please let us know in the comment. Join the conversation. Let us know who we didn't think about, who you think will be a great replacement, or just tell us if you think maybe the Foo Fighters should just call it quits, the end of the Foo Fighters, and the members can do other things in the future. Again, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Like we said, we want to bring that record store talk online. That's kind of our vision. We're a record store. We love talking to people about music, so we're doing it here on YouTube as well now. All right, thanks for watching. See y'all soon.